Thank you so much for joining Dental Marketing Theory, a podcast by Gary Bird. Dr. Dipesh Patel, the CEO of Blueprint Smiles, stops by to talk with Gary about turning adversity into success, building a winning practice culture, and the importance of creating balance for dentists and their teams. As always, please make sure to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment, as all of those things really help to get the word out about dental marketing theory. Hope you enjoy today's show.
All right, we are live. Dr. Patel, good to have you today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited. You have a very unique platform that you guys are building, and I love your company culture and what you guys are building and trying to build. And I think you guys are going to bring great impact. So a lot of value that you're going to be able to add to people today. And something that's been really popular with our audience as we go through this is sharing how people got in the dental industry. And I would love for you to start there and share how you got into dental and how that's kind of impacted your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So very typical like immigrant type of story. My parents immigrated from India when I was about a year and a half, about 2 years old, a little under 2 years old. So I spent most of my life in Georgia. I call myself pretty much born and raised, even though I wasn't born in Georgia. And went to the University of Georgia. Then I knew I wanted to go into something medicine related. I have a lot of family doctors. And believe it or not, it was one summer at a wedding. One of my family doctors asked what I planned on doing. And I said, hey, trying to be a doctor just like you, a physician just like you. And he's like, don't. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, have you considered dental school? It's pretty much the same thing, but their lifestyle seems to be a lot better. He's like, my friends, they tend to be off a lot. The lifestyle is a lot better. Look into it. So I kind of, started shadowing some dentists. And one of the first dentists that I actually shadowed asked him why they had picked dentistry over any other profession. And that dentist told me at the time, they eventually wanted to have kids and wanted the flexibility of not having to be on call, not wanting the hospital stress, and coaching their son's soccer team. And I don't have kids yet, but I eventually want to have kids, and I'm a big baseball guy, so I started seeing myself wanting to do those same things. So honestly, that's really the reason why I got into dentistry. It's not like the typical story that you probably hear. I didn't have a love for teeth. I'm not going to sit here openly and say I did. Do I like teeth? Absolutely. Otherwise, it's hard to do what we did. But that's kind of how I got into dentistry from the get-go. And from University of Georgia, went off to dental school in Fort Lauderdale at Nova Southeastern and graduated in 2012.
Awesome. And so did you jump right into owning a practice, or was there a transition of hopping around to different practices?
So right when I graduated, one of the DSOs that was in Atlanta at the time, I believe they might still be here, they hired me to work at one of their locations. And the funny story is, right when I graduated in, I think it was June of 2012, I walked into that practice, and day one, there was no other doctor there. It was me from day one in an existing practice that I guess they had purchased, and they had to let the doctor go. I don't really know the backstory, but from day one, I didn't have a GPR, no AGD, came right out of school, felt pretty comfortable practicing. They put me in a practice by myself, and that was my story in 2012. That was the only practice I've ever worked at. I guess that's the only boss I've ever had. It lasted for about 3 to 4 months, and things weren't going as planned. I really didn't have the support that they said they'd give me as far as, a kid coming out of school and not knowing, barely how to practice dentistry, let alone lead a practice. So being naive in 26, I thought, hey, why won't I just go do this myself? And it's funny now because I really didn't know anything. I thought that running a practice, I was the one running the practice, and all this corporate world was making all this money off of me. So being young and naive, I just jumped in and was like, I'm gonna go buy a practice, and let's see what happens. So fast forward, 4 months later, I think it was, we might have closed on the practice a little early, but I took over January 1st, 2013 in my first private practice. And man, was it a mistake that turned into a blessing, to say the least.
Yep. And so real quickly, going back to that DSO. So you're working for the DSO. What were you expecting coming out of college? And then what did you get? Like where was that chasm? Because a lot of people don't experience that, or maybe they go work for a private practice, or maybe they're still in school.
Right. I think like everyone else, I was expecting some type of mentorship.
Mm.
Coming out of school, you only know how to practice so much. I think now, 9 years removed from school, you kind of learn that you really only learn about 10% probably in school, right? You learn the basics, but that's nothing how the real world really is. And so I was looking for, a mentor to teach me some dentistry, get faster in my skill set, teach me maybe some business side, insurance side, all the little nuances, how to lead an office. When you're 26 years old and you might be the lead by quote because you have the DMD title or DDS title, but all your teammates at your office are older than you. They know you're right out of school, right?
Yeah.
And just because you have that title and they're trying to respect you doesn't mean you've actually earned that respect. I was hoping to get all that being with that DSO, having a larger network of doctors. Honestly, I didn't get any of that, and that's why.
So you got like nothing. So you just showed up and you had to answer for everything in that office.
I kid you not. There might have been a regional person that checked in every so often, say, "Hey, how are things going?" I would say, "Hey, I need this root canal stuff," and they're like, "I'll get it to you." And 3 months go by, and they still haven't gotten it to you. It wasn't, they call it DSO support organization. Now, look, not all DSOs are bad, and they're not all made that say. I just probably happened to walk into one that I wasn't. I should have probably done a better job of evaluating the company. But when you're coming out of school, I went to school in Florida and I was trying to work in Georgia. There wasn't many interview opportunities to come out, and I didn't have any family in dentistry to, piggyback on. I didn't even have friends in dentistry. I was one of the first friends in my circle that was in dentistry. So it's weird. People came to me for advice, which was kind of stupid in hindsight, but I was the most experience I had. That probably started a journey that worked out where we are today. But that's essentially why I left so early.
And so that's great insight. And so you're burnt out, right? So you don't want to do it. And if you're going to build a practice that way, you might as well do it for yourself. So you're just like, hey, I'm going to go out and buy another practice. So you go through, did you get the loans and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so that ended up being a funny story for me. I was 26 years old. I had a ton of student loans, right? So I think when I graduated, it was like 400,000 in student loan debt coming from Nova at the time. And this was at the end of the recession, 2012. So 2012, 2013, end of the first recession at the time. There wasn't many practices available. I looked for a while, and then I got exposed to this one practice. Kind of knew the area as far as knew the city. Didn't know it inside and out. I was, raised in Georgia, so I kind of know most places. And, I remember speaking to an accountant and broker, and they're like, "Hey, this is a great practice for you. You could do well. The doctor doesn't practice there anymore. You could," they sold me on it in hindsight, right? And maybe I sold myself on it, wanting to at that age. So that I think the practice was for about 600,000, and I still, joke about how my claim to fame is that I was a negative millionaire at like 26, and so honestly, I didn't really know anything about private practice. No consultant life, nobody to get advice from. Kind of just jumped in and figured I'd have to figure it out at some point in time. What difference was it at the age of 26 or 36? That's kind of how I saw it at the time. And luckily for me, now looking back, it worked out. But at the time, I would tell no one to purchase the same practice I purchased. It was a shit show, to say the least.
What was going on with it?
So in my first year at this practice, it was an 80% Medicaid practice, and it happened to be in the worst part of town. Adults and kids, right? So a combination. In Georgia Medicaid, it might be different now, but it wasn't great at the time.
Yeah.
So it was 80% Medicaid. They took HMO, PPO. They took everything. Later, I found out it was on the worst street in that town. So I'm from Marietta. My practice is in Marietta, Georgia. At the time, the practice where it was located, I didn't know this till later, till patients would come by, and some patients came from different parts of town. They're like, "Hey, we were scared to come here," and I was like, "What are you guys talking about?" They're like, "This road has a bad reputation, right?" And it changed over time. Don't get me wrong, but that was my awakening, I guess. And it was a 6-chair practice, paper charts. I think you had Dentrix at the time, but paper charts, film X-rays, you name it, very old school. I went to Nova where technology was at the forefront. They always kind of preached it and stuff. So I felt like I went backwards when I took on that practice.
So what did you do with that practice? Like, what do you do with a practice like that?
So it's still the same practice, believe it or not. We just moved in. That kind of started the cycle for me. Everything, I believe, my first 6 months of owning that practice, we had a break in after hours because there was a pharmacy next door. They were trying to break into the pharmacy. We had a flood. It flooded the back of the practice because it was a vacant. It was in a strip mall, but it was a vacant unit next door. And I guess it snowed in Georgia, which apparently doesn't happen much. But it flooded to our place.
Wow.
Everything broke. Compressor, vacuum, 2 out of 3 X-ray heads, you name it. The worst that could have happened probably happened. And I think it was around 8 or 9 months into the practice after all this happened where I kind of finally understood what a P&L was. I started looking at it and I was like, well, I am making less money working full-time here than I was at the corporate office. And it was a real shock to me that I was actually breaking even. The only reason I was breaking even at the time was because I wasn't paying myself. So
how were you living? What were you living on then? How were you living?
Honestly, I had remaining money from student loans, right? Yeah. So I had remaining money from student loans. I was still kind of living off that. I was paying myself like the bare minimum.
Yeah.
You know, I've always learned to kind of budget a little bit. So I wasn't living the extravagant lifestyle that some people want to live when they came out of school, and nor could I, right? With all the debt and everything else, I couldn't do it either way. So, you know, I was just making it by. And I remember at the time I was thinking, all right, I got to do something about it. No one's going to buy this. I can't sell it at a loss. So we got to start changing things. So that's actually how Blueprint Smiles came to creation. It was out of necessity. I remember looking up like website companies at the time, and they're like, hey, it's 10K to make a website and all this other stuff. And consultants cost an arm and a leg. And I was like, well, I need the help because I have no money and I can't afford to pay anyone. So I reached out to a couple buddies from undergrad that used to make websites and write content and stuff like that. And that's kind of how our company got started. I was told them I'd pay them a percentage of collections, and I told them I can't be the same one in the same boat. I'm sure there's going to be other people, and let's see if something can come of, and I'll pay you guys a percentage of growth.
Wow.
And then we got to work. Honestly,
That's
then we
awesome.
got to work, and the practice started evolving and changing. And over 2 years, we went from 80% Medicaid to 0, and I think we grew from like 600,000 to like 1 million. And
wow.
during that same time, I learned dentistry, right?
So
I still had no mentor.
Yeah. So that bad experience actually turned into probably massive confidence at that point, right?
I wouldn't say massive confidence, at some confidence, right? You're starting to get out of it. But what it actually did in hindsight is it made me fall in love with self-development, right? Of some sort. So it made me fall in love with, you know, the grind, seeing the changes, making the changes, seeing growth. And by the time the growth started happening, I never cared. I stopped caring about the end result of it. I just started falling in love with the process of growth, who I was becoming in the process, who my team was becoming in the process, what the practice was becoming. And that same practice still exists. That's still my baby. You know, it's still where I kind of practice a couple of days a week. Now we've moved that practice since then. And, you know, we've done the whole trajectory. We went from 80% Medicaid to completely out of network, believe it or not, moved the practice within 5 years, rebranded it, and then went back in network. And so I've done the entire cycle, but through those entire cycles, you learn everything from marketing to SEO to patient acquisition. And it took thousands of courses in between dental and business. And,
so you were learning everything. And as you said something there too, that I really love, that I believe is a, for entrepreneur like yourself is so crucial, is that a lot of times I would obsess over goals, right? And then what happens? We get to that goal, and what do? We just create another goal. So goals are not what brings happiness or joy in the process. It's learning how to enjoy the process getting to your goals. And when you have that mind flip, it really does change the way you just approach problems. And the problems are just things that are slowing you down from getting to the next step, but you're learning through those. That's the only way that you learn, is through failing and mess ups, right? So I love that mindset.
It's I think it reminds me of like one of my favorite quotes. It's, you know, we never lose. We either win or we learn, right? In every circumstance. And if you can kind of change that into your mindset for anybody that's kind of listening, like, don't be attached to the end result, you know, just be attached to the process. And if you truly, truly find love in that process, you will stop caring you'll care that you're successful or not, whatever you want to define yourself as success. But you'll look back and be happier because of the growth in the process than whatever you accomplished.
Yep. And everything ends up coming anyways, right? Like if you really focus on that, all the stuff that you wanted before ends up coming about anyways. I love it. So you got this practice, you built it up. what were the next steps in this journey?
So yeah, the next steps was I actually had my roommate from dental school. He had graduated. He was working at a different corporate office or DSO in Georgia, and he wasn't doing so well. Like I think he was like a third or fourth doctor there, and it just wasn't growing. And then I told him, hey, why wouldn't you just do the same thing I did? And for him, it was like, hey, I don't know anything. Well, it's a funny story now because I remember telling him, well, you'll know at least a year more than I did at that same point in time because I will consult you through the process. I won't let you make the same mistakes.
That's awesome.
Believe it or not, he was our first client. We were a consulting, quote unquote. I use this in parentheses because I don't know how good we were at the time, but we were a consulting firm and he was our first client. And, we kind of handpicked his practice to make sure it wasn't the wrong one. And he bought that practice. It grew, I think, $200,000 every year for the first couple of years. I think it was doing like 700, then like 9 and 1 point whatever. And because he had the same debt situation that I did. That kind of started our journey. Then I purchased a second practice, and that's when the real growth started happening. Because I always tell people it's one thing to run your own practice while you're there. It turns into running a business when you're no longer there.
Yeah.
Right. And so to learn how to, graduate from being a practice owner to a business owner is when you really step away and see if your systems start working. And if were you the reason behind it all, or was it your systems?
Yeah.
And so we purchased a second practice where I've never actually practiced in. And I wanted to see if we could grow it organically just through our systems, same team. And then that practice grew, fast forward a couple of years. We bought a couple more practices, me and Dr. Ravi, who was our first consulting client, combined forces with the consulting firm that I had, turned it into a management team, and that created our DSO that exists today. And right now we have about five practices. So
that's awesome. Yeah, and I know something that you said there that's really crucial as you move through entrepreneurship is a lot of times at the beginning you act off your gut, and you're looking inside your gut of, I think I should do this or I think I should do that, but your team's not going to be able to do that intuitively because they haven't been through the whole process like you have. So it totally changes when you move to an executive because you can't follow your gut anymore because you're not in the offices. So there's no gut to respond to. You have to learn how to leverage your team, leverage data, leverage the systems. So I love that. So now you're a full-fledged DSO. You have the legal structure. You're at 5 practices. What did you learn through that process, and where are you guys trying to go now? Like what's your North Star now?
Well, first and foremost, we learned that we really didn't know anything, right? So every process when you have your first practice, your first de novo, your second one when you're not there, you learn different things through every element. And even when we got to our 5th one, even though we were doing relatively well, whatever people want to consider well, we actually hadn't had figured out a lot, and we were still trying to put the pieces together because you're hiring your first executives, you're hiring your first remote team. All these things are starting to happen. And every step required a different version of us. So you're constantly reinventing the wheel. So what we actually learned is you really never know enough until you're put into a new position. Mm-hmm. And just to be kind of prepared for that next version, just understanding that you might have to reinvent yourself over and over and over as you take the next step in the process. And in reality, COVID ended up being the best thing that happened for our organization. The worst thing that happened for society, and I wish it didn't happen. But as a whole for our organization, actually gave us time to kind of reflect, look at it from a bird's eye point of view to go, okay, we're going to throw darts at our systems and let's see where it's wrong. Let's just throw it and look at that system and see if it's replicable. And if it's not, it needs to change. And we started doing that little by little, and that's kind of where the evolution happened. And then we kind of changed our entire model over the last year. And that model went from, wanting to create a DSO to we changed it to, we kind of call ourselves a PSO, a people service organization, right? Yeah, we do DSO stuff. Do we support the offices? Absolutely. But our mind shifts changed. And I think it came from Dr. Ravi and myself. We built these practices, honestly, around our lifestyle, right? And that's ultimately what made us happy. The things we didn't like when we worked at any other DSOs or any of the private practices that we heard from other doctors, we go, okay, let's not bring that here. I know
Mm.
it might affect the bottom line, right? And other people may be able to get away with it, and they do a great job with their systems, right? And their model. But for us, I didn't want the DSO or the group practice or whatever you want to call us to dictate our lives. I wanted our lives to be the focal point around everything. So we're kind of life centric. That's kind of where that work
I
life
love,
thrive came from.
yeah, I
And
love that. So like, what is that for somebody, a 10-year-old asks you, what exactly does that mean? How does that play out in real life?
so, I mean, if I'm talking to a 10-year-old, their life is great, right? So it's gonna be a little bit different for a 10-year-old. They're just playing at the park
Yeah,
and
no, but
stuff.
I mean, like, if you were explaining to a 10-year-old what lifestyle, building a dental practice around your lifestyle, what does that look like?
So I guess the easiest way I can describe, or how I describe it to our doctors or our teammates across the board, is, most people find a job they think that's going to make them happy, or they think they're going to make X amount of dollars. That's going to do this. That's going to do that. And eventually, if you keep asking that why or what game, it goes, oh, because I ultimately want to be happy,
Mhm.
right? That's ultimately why we do what we do. So if the ultimate goal is to be happy, we just thought, why not make which your work part of that happiness
Mhm.
in reality? Because we sleep for 8 hours a day, we
Yep.
work for about 8 hours a day, and we're
Yep.
doing whatever else for 8 hours a day, right? That's a third of our lives,
Yep.
right? That we're actually at work. Why would you want to be miserable for that third?
I'm
So
with
for
you.
me, for me, it became, okay, did I like having a 7 a.m. one day, a 9 a.m. the
Mm.
next day, a 10 a.m. the next day, and then coming home at 5 one day,
Yep.
7 one day, and then Saturdays and Fridays? And no, I didn't. I hated it, right? Because I'd have friends hanging out and I couldn't go, right? Or my sleep cycle was off, and that's terrible for your health.
Yeah.
I didn't like any of those things, right? And so we go, I get that our consumer, which is patients, want those availabilities. But in reality, if my teammates at the office level are not healthy enough or happy enough or burnt out, well, what kind of product are they going to be able to
Yeah.
deliver anyway?
Yeah. So what do
Probably
you
not that great.
do? What do you do to solve that? So do you find a doctor? Maybe there's a mom doctor who wants to come in early and be off early for her kids, or how do you solve that?
So we're still trying to solve it, but at least what our formula right now is, we go 8 to 5. So we
Okay.
go 8 to 5. So it's enough time to drop off your kids, and maybe you may not be able to pick them up, but we go top down, and we're okay if you get done at 4 o'clock and everybody's done. Everybody can leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people have to stay to answer phones and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but we have remote teams helping with those elements. But we want to be able for everyone to be able to drop off their kids in the morning and
Yeah.
possibly make it to their 5 o'clock games or 6 o'clock games,
Yeah.
and then so our model is 8 to 5, Monday to Thursday, every other Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to take every other Friday off, and the Fridays that we work are actually 8 to 2 straight through lunch. So it's
Got it.
a smaller
Shorter
Friday.
day.
So
Yeah.
so everyone gets a 3-day weekend twice a month at least.
Yeah.
Pretty much a 3-day weekend every single time. Now, is it a little bit harder on us to make that work? Absolutely. We know we lose out on some patients.
Yep.
But ultimately, I think we have more productive offices in the time frame we're in. That means our systems have to be a little bit better. And when that's all clicking, which luckily right now it is, then honestly, everybody's happy, right? We now have 11 doctors, and we've had 5 join us this year.
That's
And
awesome.
all of them will tell you that they're happier today. Actually, their spouses will tell you that they're happier today than the other way around. And we said we purposely did that. We knew what we were sacrificing in the private, but we're not going to sacrifice people's lives.
Yeah, there's plenty of other examples of that in the business world, right? You look at someone like Chick-fil-A produces the most revenue out of any chain restaurant, but they're open one less day a week, which is like 52 days, almost 2 months. They're open less than everybody else, but they still produce more than everybody else because they figured out a model that worked for them. And I think that's what you're doing, right? You're figuring out a model that works for you that may not work for somebody else.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that. I was asked at a conference before. They're like, "What is y'all's model? What does it replicate?" Right? And I literally go that somebody said, "What's your secret sauce?" And I'm like, "The Chick-fil-A sauce." That's
Yes.
actually what I said. Chick-fil-A, and I told him, I was like, "You see Chick-fil-A, and you have kids working there in high school, right? And they rotate through because they're not working there forever, and somehow their system is so tight that they're still able to be one of the most successful, if not the most successful, fast food franchise open 52 days less than everyone else in a year, and they're the most profitable. Because if you go there, everybody's super happy, and the end result is their product is great. Don't get me wrong, the chicken sandwich is great, but so is what our clinicians do at our office level, right? Our product is great. We will never sacrifice on that. But I think they're able to do that because when they're coming to work, they're not looking at Sundays going, oh, I got to go to work on Monday.
Yeah.
They're like, I got to go to work on Monday, right? And that's honestly how I felt. I didn't feel that way before. It took a long time to build it. And now I go, I don't really care if it's Sunday or it's Monday. It all is the same to me. Everybody's kind of excited to be there. And I know it sounds fake. And I've had some doctors that told me that it sounded fake until they kind of joined, and I'm like, was it? They're like, no, I don't even know how. I can't even explain it, right? Yeah. And we're lucky that we kind of caught on to it a little bit early from personal experience. But all we're really trying to do is have people have a better life first, work second in reality, and prevent burnout, which is very prevalent in our industry anyway.
Yeah, 100%. One thing for me, I always thought when I first got into business, I just thought culture stuff was just fluffy, like stuff that buzzwords that people threw out there, right? And then I learned over time that it's the most important thing that you can possibly do is be passionate about what you're doing and your team being passionate. So what you're saying is not fake, because I love the people I work with every day, and they love coming to work too, and it's evident because when we meet, we enjoy it. And that doesn't mean there's not hard times or things that happen that are negative and we have to work through those. But overall, it makes the whole process exciting. Every single day, I'm excited to wake up and go for that. So I know exactly what you're aiming for there. And another question on that. So when you are sitting down with doctors practically, like, so I'm a doctor and you're like, hey, I want to bring you into what we're doing. How are you presenting this lifestyle practice that you're building around them so they understand that? Because sometimes that can be a little tough.
So, I mean, one of the first questions that we ask is, we'll ask doctors, like, what are you trying to make, right? Realistically. And we'll go through the why behind it, right? And, everybody has student loans, at least this day and age, it seems like they do. So we'll work through that exercise to see what's the real motive behind what they're trying to do, right? And then we'll actually have a sit-down conversation about what do they really want in life. Not just dentistry. I tell them that's the second question I usually have about what you want in your dental career. What do you want in life, right? And if they're younger, when I was younger, I didn't really know what I wanted when I was in my 20s, right? I didn't really know that I wanted a family, that I wanted time off. It wasn't until I started feeling burnt out that I started realizing those things, that this is more important. So I'm getting them to the answer a little bit quicker during those conversations. I'm telling them to fast forward 10 years from now and try to build that life now into what they're trying to do. And part of that element of that life is work. And so we'll kind of run through those exercises, and I'll tell them, hey, tell me what you didn't like about your previous office or wherever you worked before. Tell me. And I tell them, we're completely transparent here. If I can't offer you those things here, I'm not going to try. I tell every doctor, I'm like, look, if you tell me you want to work every Friday, this is not the place for you. I'm sorry. We're just not going to.
Because your staff, because you've already told your staff you're not going to do that, right?
Yep. And I'm going to be kind of transparent, fair across the board. So usually we tell them, I'm like, look, this is not what you're looking for, right? This is probably not the right fit. And we tell them, look, we're an open book. We're not going to lie to you about anything, because the only thing that will happen is 6 months down the line, it'll catch up to one of us. And then this will end. And then retention is the most important thing to us as a company anyway. And I was like, that's going to start suffering from it. So let's just be open and transparent from the beginning. And that's kind of the conversation we have. We don't fluff it up, right? I was sold a lot before. Like I told you, we took everything we were sold before and didn't like, and we decided to reverse it. Yeah, and that's awesome. That's kind of what we built.
That's a great learning way to learn, right? Is when you buy a practice that they totally pumped up and artificially made it look like a great practice when it wasn't. Yep. That's a great way to learn the process from the opposite end. So I know one thing that people struggle with is measuring their culture, especially when you have a DSO and you have multiple practices, several, handfuls of doctors and then even more team members. How do you actually measure your team and the culture of your team?
Right. And I know there's like a lot of fancy ways to measure it. When you get into the group space, they always talk about all these cultural tests, and, you can get reports back, inquiries, just like you do with patient reviews, you get your staff reviews. Honestly, as far as a management team, the rest of the team, we do it by retention rate, right? So we'll see how many teammates we have and how many did we lose this year. and why did we lose them? Right.
Mm.
So we have brackets for why we would have lost them. And, if somebody left, like we recently had an assistant that left one of our offices. Now she gave us like a month, which is unheard of right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason why she was leaving is she went back to her old career. She tried out dentistry. Dentistry wasn't for her. She didn't leave for another dental office. And she straight up told her, she's like, I'm going to go back to hairdressing. I thought I didn't love hairdressing. I went into dentistry. You guys gave me a chance. I love it here. It's just my heart's not there. And I told her, you definitely should then. Right.
Yeah.
And we actually have, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's that poster that became really famous about life. Right. And it was like, if you don't like your life, or if you don't like your job, quit. Well, we actually have that posted in every single office of ours.
That's awesome.
Right. In the break room. And we tell our team, like, look, if you're miserable, we're going to see it. Your work product is going to see it. Let's find you into a better place. So retention is number one. Now, I didn't mark her as we lost her, right? She went off to something else. She didn't leave our office for another dental office. It wasn't those reasons. She left for a completely different career. So I say retention for us. And then we also calculate the number of days randomly taken off by our teammates because they were sick outside of COVID. And the reason being is our whole philosophy is work, life, thrive, personal and professional development, right? So we teach professional development and personal development. So we'll give tips on, hey, how do you stay healthy, right? And look, if they're not burnt out, they're most likely going to be healthier.
Yeah.
And so that means they'll have less sick days. They won't have to take off randomly. So we also base it upon that, because if they're overstressed, they're not sleeping well, they're overworked, they're going to get sick, they're going to take days off. If we can keep those two numbers, retention and number of days taken off, to a minimum, to me, I think the culture is going well at the office.
I love that. Yeah. And one thing that I say constantly to our team is, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, life is too short. Go find what you're passionate about. And sometimes people struggle with that when they're younger, right? So, and I get that. When you're younger, it's like, well, I don't know what I'm passionate about, and that's okay. But start moving in that direction. And I really like the way that you're measuring the culture there. How do you deal with, it just popped into my head because this is something that we deal with. We have a lot of team members who have kids who get sick. So they're like, hey, my kid's sick. And we of course are like, well, your kid's the most important thing. Go take care of your kid. Are you baking that into your metrics in there? Because obviously that's not them getting sick.
So, at our office, if the kid is sick and they can still come in with the parent, right? We have rooms set aside where the kids can be there.
That's so cool.
Because sometimes they don't have that, right?
Yeah.
So, as long as the kid, like all of our doctors have their doctor offices. I've had kids sleep in my office before.
That's so awesome.
Right? If it's going to allow the assistant or hygienist or the other doctor to be there because they want to be there for the rest of their team, right? Then we're going to do everything we can to help make that happen. Now, unfortunately, in dentistry, there's not so many positions. Like for you guys can do a lot of remote work. Right?
Yeah.
We can't do much remote work outside of our business assistants, or front, as we call it. Now, we do have that set where they can work remotely. Right. We don't want them to, because it's always better having them at the office, how a dental office functions. But we have the systems in place to let them work remotely. And we also have the systems in place at our office. And that's where the ChickfilA efficiency comes in. Our operatories, our setup is set up in a way where we can be short-staffed and still function. So if that happens, we don't have to, things don't fall apart at our offices. Is it great when we have everybody? Absolutely. But it's rare that we have to take a teammate from one office and take them to another office. Are they willing to do that? Yes. But do we make them do that pretty often? Absolutely not.
That's smart.
It's an inconvenience to everyone. That's why. So
what would you say some of the things that you've learned from a characteristic standpoint that has helped you turn into the leader that you are today?
As far as, I guess what you would say would be a good leader of some sort?
What would be what if you were making a leader?
Right.
So you're going to make a leader to go lead and double your organization. What characteristics are you looking for somebody that you're going to follow?
Gotcha. So, as far as leadership, everybody knows about the normal ones, time management, understanding people, motivational. You have to be able to articulate your message across the board. I think all those are great. Those are great leadership characteristics. For me, it comes down to two, self-awareness and EQ. Emotional intelligence, right? Yep. IQ is great, right? That makes great executives. Don't get me wrong. I think it's the EQ and the self-awareness that really makes great leaders. And the ones that understand that, and it took me a while to understand that. Don't get me wrong. I kind of inherited my position because I created the company as CEO and founder of the company. I was chief executive officer. I've now kind of changed that title. I don't think I'm a chief executive. I'm a chief emotional officer at this point, right? And that means everyone else's emotions I need to understand so I can prevent them from burning out. So if that happens, they're not going to be productive and they're not going to get the best out of themselves and or lead their teams right. So I'm constantly getting a pulse on my team across from the management team all the way down to see how people are feeling. Right. And, unfortunately, we've kind of grown where I can't talk to every single person, but there's people that they report to and the whole system's built around it. I want to make sure everybody's emotionally doing well. And as far as I go, it's like the whole airplane analogy. I make sure I'm taken care of. And this might be the most selfish thing. I'm not very selfish. And this is going to be the most selfish thing I tell any entrepreneur. Take care of yourself in the most non-selfish way possible first. Yeah. Because if you are not emotionally stable, meaning you're getting too stressed, you're flying off the wall, you're getting mad at people for whatever reason, you didn't sleep well, whatever it might be, right? Then it's going to have a bad trickle-down effect in your organization. You have to be able to take care of your emotions first. So if I'm trying to build a leader, I'm looking for the EQ, emotional intelligence, and I'm looking for that self-awareness, right? And if they have those two traits, I think they'll figure out everything else.
I love that. Yeah, self-awareness is one of our core values, and really understanding yourself is really the beginning of understanding other people, right? So if you're flying off the handle, to your point, it's really hard to help anybody else. I really love that. So where do you see, where are you guys going over the next couple of years? What's your guys' goals?
We finally put all the systems in place. Things are going really well. We'd like to partner with other dentists, right? So we're probably going to take both routes. If there's a dentist that's tired of, running the managerial side of things and, they're getting kind of burnt out, then we'd love to partner with them. We have a partnership track for all of our doctors, by the way, true equity ownership in it. So it's the same thing for us if they come in that way or it happens afterwards. So if they want to sell all their practice or none of their practice or part of their practice, we can kind of figure something out on that front. Or the de novo route, we might go the de novo route as well in certain locations as well. I think our system and infrastructure is there now where we can do the ChickfilA model to some degree. So that's kind of what we're looking at. I'd wish I had a more clear answer for you to say, hey, we'd like to have 15 more offices next year. Honestly, that's not true for us. If we want to go purchase a few practices, sure. We won't do it at the sacrifice of our life. Yeah. I won't. Yeah. Right. My executive team won't. It's too important for us to be happy. Does this make us happy as we're evolving, growing? Yes.
So walk me through how that shows up in meetings and things like that, right? Because obviously when you have a meeting, you need structure and then you need like some kind of benchmarks or goals. So I know you guys have been working on your systems and getting those airtight. So now it's like, okay, we're ready for some growth. How do you then walk through on when to grow and what's that trigger for this is the one versus no, this isn't the one?
So internally, it goes, let's look at our Monday.com and what system have we not tackled? Honestly, we pretty much have went through every system that a dental practice has and have tackled those. And we'll constantly keep tweaking them, right? So we already kind of have that down. As far as like the second element goes, we have our KPIs that we'd look at for any practice that we're trying to acquire, within a certain radius of these existing practices. So we can kind of go to them if we need to, have to fit some certain number of chairs, or that's what we'll go out and build. We don't have like too many metrics because what happens, I think, is as the more knowledge you get in any industry, the more you start micromanaging, trying to handpick everything that doesn't really exist. Right. Yeah. I was telling Dr. Ravi, one of the, executive team members, I was telling him it was so much easier when I was 26 years old. I was too stupid to know better.
Yeah. You just flew by the seat of your pants, right?
And I'll just figure it out afterwards. Now what happens is, you have your Excel sheets and you have all your metrics and you're trying to plug them in to make a more precise decision. And sometimes it's a little too much. Right. So we're constantly trying to balance that. We know our 4 or 5 things that we want to look at in a practice. Once we find those things, we kind of let the rest go. And
got it. So you're actively looking for opportunities, but there's a sweet spot that has to happen for it to trigger everybody's yes.
Yeah, we as a group have decided we don't want to grow for the sake of growing, and then just cause chaos, right? Just to say we hit this revenue goal or this practice goal. So we don't want to do that. If we're constantly exploring the market, if we find a practice that fits our parameters, we'll absolutely act upon it. And the numbers are solid enough that we have all the autonomy in the world to do what we need to do right now, which is a blessing. In hindsight, from where we started, I guess.
That's awesome. Okay, so if a doctor's listening to this right now and they're like, you know what, I want to work with somebody like this, what's your elevator pitch to them, or assuming they're the right fit for you guys, and they say, hey, I like what you're doing culture-wise, and they meet all the benchmarks of working with you guys, and they say, hey, I'm considering this. What are you telling people when you're explaining who Blueprint is?
It's pretty simple. If you want a life that is that's going to thrive on the personal and professional side, and that's what you're looking for, and you ultimately want to be happy, then come join us. I promise you that we will create whatever system we have to that will be centered around your life, not your work life. And ultimately, you'll turn around and know that you are in the right place.
That is so awesome. I love that. Is there anything that I forgot to ask you? Anything that we forgot to cover?
No, I mean, people can reach out, whether you want to join us or not. You've gotten to know me a little bit. One of our, core values is gratitude, giving back. Right. So whoever's listening to this, if you're a first time trying to buy or whatnot, and you're scared about making mistakes, I'm an open book. Right. And you don't have to join us for us to help you in whatever you're trying to do. So if you want to join us, great. If you don't, just want some advice, that's fine too. Right.
How can people reach out to you? How could someone connect to you? And then just so everybody listening knows, Dr. Patel is really this way, right? And that's what I really appreciate him, because I try to live this way as well. It's like, just try to help as many people as you can. Some people are going to work with you, some aren't. But if you just help people, then everything kind of works out. So how can people reach you?
The easiest way probably be via email right now. So it'll be my first name, Dipesh, Dipesh, at blueprintsmiles.com. I'm not big into social media, but I am on Instagram and Facebook. It's Dipesh586. Connect with me, message me. I promise I'll get back to you at some point. Email is probably the best way, though, at this point in time. Don't be shy. Don't be shy to ask for help. I was early on, and that's why I kind of did it by myself. But honestly, the community approach is what led to the growth of our company. And it was a gratitude of giving back. And it's actually what my parents instilled in me. We didn't come from anything. My parents don't own much. The greatest gratitude I've had in life is being able to, buy them their first home and take care of them because they took care of me. And so, my mom, I still remember my mom, even though when my practice was struggling, when I first bought it, I remember her telling me that, hey, no matter who comes in, if they really can't afford it and you can take care of them, don't let them walk out that door. Right. And so it's something we live by. It's something I know the executive team that I work with lives by. And that's why this has been fun. Honestly, I work with 4 of my best friends and we call it a company, right? Yeah. And so if we can give back, we will. And you could probably reach out to any one of them and they'll do the exact same thing because they kind of believe in what we're preaching right now. Anybody that's listening, reach out. If you need some help, you need a vent, reach out. Awesome. It's tough out there and you don't have to do it alone.
Awesome. Thanks so much. You did a great job today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this with everybody.
No, thank you.